Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning on the West Coast. My name is Danny Koenig. I'm a director of regional recruiting with NCSA. Feeling very fortunate to be joined by an old friend of mine, old college coaching colleague, Jay Daniels. Jay, how are you?
Doing very well, enjoying this nice, beautiful day here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Not much going on. Got to take the dogs for a walk this morning and excited to be here.
And it's all good. And we get to talk recruiting. So Jay is the head men's and women's swimming and diving coach at Kalamazoo College, Kalamazoo High Academic Division III school in Michigan. Jay and I have a long coaching history back to New York. So excited to have you here. Obviously, we want to talk a lot about some of the COVID updates and just kind of discuss what you're experiencing as a coach in this time. And I think, the big one is just we want to be able to give student athletes that are aiming to compete in college a better sense for how college coaches are recruiting, but also, some of their responsibilities and what they can be doing at this time. So just briefly, Jay, I'll let you speak for yourself. Tell the people out here about your background as it relates to college coaching.
Yeah, as it relates to college coaching. So I really did not coach a ton before my first year out of college. I was a Division III athlete. I swam at Kalamazoo College for 4 years. And that's really where I fell in love kind of with the sport. And I had coached like a little summer league in between years of college. But I really was given a great opportunity to be the assistant swim coach at SUNY New Paltz in upstate New York, where we met. I was an assistant there for 2 years under a Kalamazoo College alum, Scott Whitbeck, and that's when I really, continued to fall in love with swimming, but more so fall in love with coaching. And really, my favorite part is just building relationships with student athletes and helping them achieve things that they didn't know that they were capable of. New Paltz was an awesome experience, just getting my feet wet, really focused on recruiting a whole heck of a lot, and we did a good job of bringing some numbers in there. And then I was pretty fortunate to get the assistant coaching job at my alma mater, Kalamazoo College. And then 1 year after that, I was promoted to interim head coach. And then after an interview process, was named head coach. So I've been slowly climbing my way up the ladder at Kalamazoo College, and I'm real happy to be where I am today. It's really cool working at your alma mater. Just have a lot of love for the place, a lot of passion. So it doesn't take a lot to get me going and to inspire my team, because I've been feeling the love for Kalamazoo College swimming and diving for years now. And Kalamazoo College is an awesome place, and I'm happy to be here and take it into the next steps of our program history.
Cool. And they're building a new pool there at K College. You stay there long enough, maybe they'll name it after you. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't think I deserve to have it named after me. We have some pretty awesome coaches that set me up that they should be probably having their name on the building. But yeah, we are building a new pool. It's going to be ready to rock for next season, so we're super excited for that. I think that's really going to help us train at a higher level, obviously attract some student athletes, and then I'm super excited to get some swim camps going in that new facility as well.
That's right. A lot to look forward to. Obviously, we want to focus on what's going on this year. So you saw it there down at the screen. We will do a Q&A towards the end. I want you guys to put your questions here. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Obviously, want that engagement, and we want you guys to ask Coach exactly what he's experiencing at this time. But we got some preloaded questions here for Coach we'll get to in a second. But drop those questions in the comment box. So just briefly, I think we need to address it head on, just some of the stuff that's going on here with COVID, just keeping everybody up to date. We know that Division II and Division III have canceled their fall championships for 2020. Doesn't mean that coaches aren't still recruiting, but they may not be participating in their sport. Division I is still in a dead period. College coaches can't have in-person communication with student athletes, so that no on-campus visits, no in-person recruiting at tournaments or showcases. So that's done for D1 as we know it until September 30th. But Division II opened everything back up. So Division II resumed all regular recruiting as of September 1st. They're on. And obviously, September 1st is a huge date in the college coaching world for direct communication with high school student athletes. So it's September 1st of junior year. That opened up live communication for every college coach in the country for football, women's basketball, lacrosse, softball, and baseball. So hopefully athletes in that sport that have been waiting around until their junior year to hear from those college coaches are starting to hear from college coaches. And even in the division levels where college coaches can't have in-person communication, they are able to call, email, text, those sorts of things. So a lot of communication going on. But Jay, we want to get your perspective on this whole thing, specifically as it relates to communication with athletes. I think a big question that we get from parents and student athletes are how to contact college coaches. So do you have a preference in that regard for how student athletes reach out to you?
Not particularly, if you're reaching out, that's a great way to let me know that you are interested in our program. And I think that helps me kind of know who's interested. So we have a recruit questionnaire through Front Rush that's on our website. And that's a great way to let me know. And if you fill that out, I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. Also, sending me an email is great. I don't think there's one special way. I even have gotten like text messages before from kids, and all those ways are great ways to connect with me. I'm always looking to find folks that are going to help make our swimming and diving program continue to grow and continue to compete at a high level. That's the one grind I feel like that never stops is recruiting. So any way you want to reach out to me, I'm going to be okay with that. But email is probably the best, and filling out the recruit questionnaire is great too, because there's fields so you can fill out all the information about yourself on there. And then I can just know kind of off the bat, you're fit for Kalamazoo College in general.
So when we talk about how should athletes let you know they're interested in your program, a primary driver, at least off the bat, is going to be questionnaires. These student athletes need to get in your database so you can track your communications with them. You saw it here at the bottom. We're going to post links to your questionnaires in particular. If we have swimmers and divers starting at a high level that might be interested, they should go to that site and fill that out for your program in particular. But the other ones that you had mentioned, email is going to be really important. And primary driver for communication is going to be through email in most cases. But you're saying text messages are open as well. So we know that at the Division III level in particular, you can start openly communicating directly with student athletes day one of their freshman year. Very little is off the table in that regard. But let's talk about the flip side from the perspective of the student athlete. How do you know if a college coach is interested in you?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I feel like as a young coach, I didn't understand like how to tell kids that I wanted them to be here. So I do flat out say it. One thing that I've done a little bit differently this year, just because kind of like the next step after you talk with a kid through the spring and summer is inviting them to campus or inviting them to your overnight visits. That's obviously going to be a whole different ball game this year. So I have started to put together like offer letters saying, hey, I'm really interested in you of being part of our program. Let me know kind of what I need to do to get you here. And I give them some guidelines of what I expect from them. On my end, they have to apply early, or I encourage them to apply early action. You got to keep improving yourself as a student and an athlete. And then thirdly, or lastly, you need to get accepted to Kalamazoo College. So I send offer letters that say that, kind of really affirming, not just me saying, hey, I want you to come be on our team, getting them like a written offer. And at the Division III level, there's no scholarships tied to that. So it's really me just like affirming with them, like, hey, I want you to be a part of this.
So, and a couple of really good points there, right? You need to have this open communication. There are things that Division III coaches can do to help you, through the admissions process, act as a liaison between a student athlete and financial aid, or the admissions process. And in a lot of cases, you're actually reaching out to student athletes saying, hey, we think you're a good fit for the program, and kind of letting them know some of the things that you can do to help them. But what's your methodology for kind of building your recruiting database, building a prospect list for any graduating class? How do you go about that?
Yeah. So usually when I start putting that together, the first thing I try to get is information from my team. I think we have a really good family in our swimming and diving team, both men's and women's. And they know people that are going to fit into that group. So at the end of the season, I reach out to my team and say, hey guys, if you feel comfortable, share me some contact info with folks that you know from your high school teams, from your club teams that you think might be a good fit for us here at Kalamazoo College. So that's kind of where I start first. And then from there to kind of just look at the masses and kind of get ideas of where I can find people from across the country. I do use NCAA to kind of look for folks. And usually my first search parameter on that is GPA. I look for only folks that have a 3.5 GPA or higher. I don't really look at test scores because Kalamazoo College is test optional. So once I do that search, you can kind of just scroll through and see, and I kind of just look for majors that would be well suited at K. We are very strong in the science fields. In psychology and international studies are some of the ones that I look out for in particular, that I know Kalamazoo College does very well. And then I kind of reach out from there to see, if the kid is interested. So that's really how I build my base up.
And I think that's a lot of good stuff in there. Number one, you're going to use your network, and any college coach has got their network. They have pipelines of club coaches, especially at the swimming level, particular high schools they like that graduate those high academic student athletes. But, using an NCSA, I use it as a college coach as well. I think in a lot of cases, we were in competition for some of the same student athletes, some of those high academic student athletes. But, you're in Michigan, you're able to actually communicate interest to a kid in California as long as they have this online profile and they've got the right information on there, right? So you might find a kid in the NCSA network that fits really well with what you're doing. You're building this championship roster. They're going to score points at conference and maybe be an NCAA qualifier. But if you don't know that they have the GPA in order to get into your school, it doesn't make any sense. So, for the athletes out there, you can start a free recruiting profile with NCSA. Every college coach in the country has free, unrestricted access to this network. The more you do with that profile, the better it is. Better chances you're going to be found by a coach like Jay, who needs those high academic students first, setting that GPA limit. So a lot of good stuff there, and there's a lot of athletes that are going to be qualified for your program. I want to kind of come back to the communications, because I think it's just really impressive and important for student athletes to be proactive. I always like that as a coach. So instead of finding them at NCSA, sending a cold email with some information, hoping that they're interested. If I had a student athlete coming my way, that was always, a kid that I put a little star by. So so a lot of athletes want to know, how do you send an email to a college coach? What are you looking for in that content?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, as far as like an email that you're saying like, hey, I'm interested in your school. Show that you've done a little bit of research on Kalamazoo College, that you know what we have to offer. Because sometimes we do get emails from kids that aren't academically qualified, or sometimes we get emails from kids where their major that they're looking for, we don't even offer at K. So just make sure you know who you're reaching out to. And if you give, a little bit of information and show that you already have done some homework on K, that's going to make me a little bit more interested as well, because I can tell that you've already doing your homework and it's not just like a mass email blast.
Yeah, personalized attention is always appreciated, and you want those athletes that are paying attention to those details, because you can read through the lines when that athlete is sent 300 emails out. It's the same email to every college coach. I think the case in point, you excel in the sciences, right? If you have a kid that's interested in sciences, great. But certain schools, like I had coached at schools that don't offer engineering. Right? If I get a kid that said, "Hey, I want to study, mechanical engineering," I'm like, "Well, did you do any research on my program?" You're not likely to respond to those. So, talk a little bit about the timing of this, because it's different for Division III. Athletes and coaches can have open communication as soon as they're a freshman. But do you have preferences on an athlete using email versus a phone call or a text? I mean, just kind of talk about those proper channels and when you might email, when you might have a phone call. What's appropriate for going back and forth by text?
Yeah. So usually I start this process with like email, just kind of trying to set up an initial contact. And then once we chat on the phone a couple times, usually I do most of my conversation through text message. I feel like it's easier, and I feel like student athletes these days everyone these days is glued to their phone. So it's just easier to communicate that way via text. But that's usually after a couple phone calls. And once we get into the summer, it's just a bunch of conversations, and it really depends on the kid how much I'm checking in with them and talking with them on the phone, or sometimes it's more of a person that prefers to text. I even Zoom or FaceTime with some prospective student athletes too. So all the channels are appropriate, but usually I would say it goes from email to conversations, and then once we get to know each other, we can kind of casually like text a little bit, where it doesn't always require a phone call or email. I feel like for me, at least, when you text me, it's going to be a more like immediate response, where an email, it might take a day at the most. But all of those are like proper channels. But I think once we have a relationship and we've chatted over the phone a couple of times, if you called me out of the blue, like I wouldn't be upset about that. Personally, that's just for me. I'm pretty open and flexible with any form of communication.
Yeah. And I think that should be the case as you start to build a relationship. So again, we're here with Jay Daniels. He is the head coach for the men's and women's swimming and diving program at Kalamazoo College in Michigan. Big question that athletes and parents always have for us as it relates to communications with college coaches: social media. What kind of importance do you place on social media through the recruiting process?
Yeah. So, if you have your social media stuff up on your like recruiting profile, I definitely do like take a look at it just to see, what you are like as a human being, just to kind of do that background research. And I think that's something I might do like a little bit more, just because we're not going to be able to do in-person like overnight visits, at least this fall, to have the team really get to know these student athletes. So if it's up there, college coaches, I'm not the only college coach that's going to be checking out your social media stuff if you have that open for anyone to see on NCSA. And then personally, I use our own social media, KZoo Swim and Dive, to just promote what's going on with our swim program. And I encourage all our prospective students to follow us so they can stay up to date on what's going on in our world. And I think we've been posting quite a bit on social media since we've been in quarantine here, just because that's like the one thing we can always do to kind of keep our brand out there a little bit. So I've really enjoyed putting a bunch of different graphics together for like some program history stuff, highlighting some kids on our team. So that's been fun to do on my end.
Yeah, so it's certainly a way for you as a program to kind of broadcast what you're about and your coaching philosophy and the history of the program. But really, it kind of works in the same way for student athletes, because they're promoting their own brand. In certain cases, coaches are going to cross kids off the list because of their social media presence and what they're following, and even what their Twitter handle is, or what they're posting out there. I think you're always, as a coach, looking for those intangibles, the coachable kids, the kids that want to listen, the kids that are respectful, and you can learn a lot about a student athlete through social media. So that's one of those no-nos that we talk about. Manage yourself online as you would manage yourself in person. Coaches are checking into that. We talked about another no-no earlier, just kind of sending out broad stroke emails, to every college coach, even if it's they don't offer a major, or you're in the wrong division level or something. But what are some of those other things that might turn you away from a student athlete that you've maybe experienced firsthand, like on an official visit? Or tell us a little bit more about what student athletes and parents should be staying away from.
Oh man, that's a good question. What turns me away from a student athlete? One thing that kind of on the topic of communication is, if I have to hound you several times to just get on the phone with you, or to have you turn in something for me in the recruiting process, I feel like that speaks volumes to what you could be like as an athlete for me. So if it's a pain in the butt to kind of recruit you, my guess would say it could be a pain in the butt to have you on the team when it comes to that communication stuff. So that can turn me off real quick. On in-person recruiting trips, we want you to come to Kalamazoo College, but you should also you need to impress us as well. I really put a lot of value in my team's opinion. And there have been situations where we've had people visit campus, and I've had my leaders come to me and they said, "Hey coach, I'm not sure if this person is a good fit." Then that has to lead to an honest conversation with the prospective student athlete of, hey, this is why you may not be a good fit for us. I try to be open and honest in all my communication with prospective student athletes, and I expect the same in return.
I think those are great points, ones that actually haven't come up very much. I do think that there's a factor of just kind of a paralyzing fear for a high school student athlete communicating with a coach. But if coach is asking you for something, there's a reason. They need it. They want to hear from you. You don't need to be afraid of a guy like Jay. Obviously, he's an easygoing cat, easy to talk to. And most coaches are like that. They've been through this process a lot. So if that coach is reaching out, do them the courtesy of either saying you're not interested, be timely in your response. If you are interested, do a little bit of research, ask some thoughtful questions. If coach is asking for a transcript or a test scores, they're trying to help you. If they need you to fill out a questionnaire, sure, it might take you 10 minutes, but they do want to track your communications, and that's important. The official visit piece, when you're hosting those visits as a coach, it takes a long time to set those things up. And you're coordinating classes and trying to get that student to the right classes with a swimmer or diver. You need to coordinate meals and submit meal tickets. So setting up those visits, it's a big deal for the coaches and for the athletes. they really are excited about hosting you and showcasing the school and your swim program. But at the same time, very similar to what we were talking about with the social media side of things, you're there to kind of prove yourself and really, showcase your brand to the program and make sure it's a good fit. So, a lot goes into that. These are things that you have to pay attention to as a recruit. Obviously, there's things you need to do before you get to the point where you're going on that official visit, but you need to take that official visit very seriously. Because I, as a swimmer at the University of Wisconsin, saw a kid get sent home because he wasn't being very good, and I'm sure our coaches didn't communicate with that athlete anymore. So appreciate the insight on those fronts. So Jay, want to get to some of the COVID stuff. Everybody's in a little bit of a different position. You and I were talking about this yesterday. Your experience is going to be different from everybody else, but as we know it, basically things have been blown to bits. The traditional recruiting paths, and coaches are resilient. They're going to figure out a way to get this done. So what are you experiencing at Kalamazoo now? What are your students experiencing? What's coming up for the fall? And then how are you reacting a little bit as a coach?
Yeah. So, going back to the beginning of this, when we kind of closed down campus in March, the one thing that I was ready to do was just kind of recruit, because that was really the only thing I could do at that point. So, I hopped on NCSA and really got a jump on the class of 2021.
But let's back up there for a second, because I know that you're one that'll travel to meets. A lot of meets got canceled as well. And on top of that, where there were NCAA restrictions on actually having in-person communication. So at March, you knew the only thing you could do right then was actually focus on recruiting. But did things change for you at that time in March?
Yeah, kind of. I was ready to go to the Michigan High School Boys State meet. I was ready to go, about to see a bunch of my incomings or identify people for the 2021 class, have them, watch them swim, hopefully very fast at the state meet. So that was challenging. And I was ready to go to Oakland University to watch that meet play out. And, I really felt for the athletes that got that opportunity kind of taken away from them. So right then and there, I was like, all right, this is going to be a little bit different. Another thing I do for a little bit of recruiting during the summer is doing swim camps. We have a swim camp here at Kalamazoo College, and I go to a couple camps in New York, and I'm able to make some contact with some kids. And that wasn't an opportunity either. Also, I feel like just the general college visits where you have people kind of swinging through Kalamazoo as they're looking at all the schools in the state of Michigan, that really didn't happen anymore. So I feel like I had to personally identify recruits for myself a little bit more this year compared to years past, just because I didn't have access to them on in-campus visits during the summer or just going to swim meets and stuff, because swim meets this summer really weren't happening either. So it was tough to even, try to find kids. And that's really what I've been working on really hard, is just on the phone a bunch. I've done some Zoom calls, kind of my next step. Once school starts up, even though we are all virtual at Kalamazoo College, we're going to have some of our student athletes be reaching out to our recruits and doing Zoom calls once the academic year begins, just to kind of start that connection. But kind of backtracking a little bit, Kalamazoo College is going all virtual this fall. That was announced last week. So it's a tough decision. I would not want to be a school administrator right now. There's a lot of tough decisions that are being made across the country. I personally believe that Kalamazoo College made the right move. But we'll see what that means for athletics. We're still trying to figure that out. I guess in some ways I'm still pretty hopeful, as swimming and diving is a winter sport. And I think we can still problem solve in order to get a season together, if that's even safe on the other half of our swim season, after January 1. So it's a lot of waiting and being patient, to be honest. I've been in a lot of contact with my team, but that's pretty much the big changes. Just everything has been virtual. I've had the opportunity in the summer to get a couple kids on campus, but then we had to shut down campus for safety reasons. So I was very thankful to get those folks on. And it was pretty cool to show off our pool. That was the first time I could show off our construction site and have it actually looking like a building. So I was pretty stoked, even though we got 15 kids there, at least they got to see it. So I was really happy about that. So I'm sure there's going to be more changes as we go into the fall, like I said, with us being virtual, and that pretty much eliminates the overnight experience for the fall for sure. So really just finding different ways to get these student athletes engaged and getting them to meet the team and learn as much about Kalamazoo College as possible without being there in person. The college does plan to open up for campus tours in mid-September, so we'll be able to get that going a little bit, and I'm excited about that. But really, I'm using my team as the selling point. I'm a pretty good salesman for Kalamazoo College. I can talk to you about the academic programmings, you're fit for the school, but it's really comes down to like, how do you feel with that team? And I feel like that's such an important part that's going to look really different this year. So that's where my mind is how can I get these prospective student athletes in with the team to a point where they're saying like, hey, I want to be a part of this group.
So you got to figure it out, and you still got to sell the school. And admittedly, things change. I hope that there's a college swimming season as well in some capacity as a lifelong fan and a coach. But understand you got to do what you do on the safety side of things. Recruiting's not stopping. It's just a little bit different. And, like Jay was saying, he wasn't able to get to swim meets and actually see these kids in person. His path to actually hosting student athletes has changed a little bit, but he's getting creative with it. He's using his online resources. He's on the computer. He's calling kids, sending texts, emails, whatever he can do, right down to hosting Zoom meetings and Zoom tours, hosted by some of his student athletes and things like that. So big message here, recruiting's not stopping. You may not have a season in high school or club. Jay's season's been postponed indefinitely, but he's still trying to build championship roster, and he's very competitive and he's very passionate about this. So, certainly appreciate that. I do want to get to some questions, Jay. I want the people to kind of weigh in and pick your brain here. So I'm excited to see what we've got. This one from Chad. Is 8th grade too young to start an NCSA profile? So I'll say this, and I'll let you weigh in. As soon as you turn 13 years old is the day that you're recruitably aged, and that's an NCAA rule. So we'll work with anybody 13 years and older, and in some cases at very high levels, depending on the sport, we will get college coaches submitting requests in 8th grade. They're trying to track these athletes and reach out to their coaches and do their homework. So that's absolutely a part of this. And I think if you know that you have an 8th grader that wants to participate in college athletics, there's no harm to starting a free recruiting profile, getting your information together, and starting to explore what options you might have. So short answer, yes. But Jay, as it relates to the recruiting process, what are your thoughts on an 8th grader?
I'm not going to probably look at the recruiting profile of an 8th grader, to be completely honest. Usually I focus on like juniors and seniors. That's where I spend my time, just because the way our recruiting calendar works, generally like the spring of your junior year or any time in your junior year is kind of when I make like first contacts. And then obviously all the way through the senior year, but that's generally when I start and kind of what I look at, because I feel like my recruiting season is from like March to March is kind of it. If you start the March of your junior year all the way to the March of your senior year, that's kind of when I'm looking to recruit you the most. And I feel like that's kind of how the Division III recruiting cycle works. Different programs kind of have different methods with that, but that's what I've been doing, is kind of starting there. And if you're a freshman or sophomore and you like reach out to me, I'm happy to do that. And then there's been folks that come on campus tours super early, and admissions reaches out to me and says, hey, this person is here and wants to chat with you. I'm always open to chat. But as far as like the serious recruiting process, I usually do just juniors and seniors.
Yeah. So, and I think there's a couple things to note there for those that are watching that are not swimmers. Jay's talking about high academic Division III. So there's a couple things that factor into that. Grades is going to be a big one. I mean, you really can't do much with admissions until these athletes probably have close to 6 semesters in. Yeah. So, once they're halfway through their junior year, you could possibly send a transcript over and get a sense, but there's still a lot of semesters to go before they're going to actually apply. Swimming, admittedly, is a little bit later. I just think developmentally, you're going to get kids that are continuing to get faster into junior and senior year. So swimming versus maybe like women's volleyball is going to be naturally a little bit late and a little bit later for you at the Division III level. But I know that you're going to get swimmers that are swimming pretty solid college times by the time they're a sophomore. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have some D1 coaches that are going to start to build their prospect list with a rising sophomore, because they're going to want to reach out day one, right? June 15th after their sophomore year is when it's open contact period. I know you may not start reaching out or being able to do much with these athletes until their junior year, but when do you actually start to look or like use an NCSA to build that database for who you want to contact?
Yeah, it's usually like in the spring. I feel like the spring and summer is where I do most of my like database building. So once it comes to fall, we can start having those high school seniors on campus for visits. And that's when there's, starting the application process. So that's when I do most of my database building, is kind of, after I have a good idea of what my current class is going to look like, so I kind of know where to start and what areas I may want to address.
Gotcha. And like I said, there's certain things that you can do as their coach. You don't offer athletic scholarships, but there is opportunity to earn money at a Division III school. What's the timeline there? I don't want to reveal any crazy secrets here. I used to deal with it at Vassar all the time. You can work with certain student athletes that are paying attention and doing a good job, and kids that you're really excited about. Typically, when you're hosting a kid, that's a pretty serious commitment on your end. But when does certain academic pieces start to fall into play? You talked about early action. When do you need to start looking at some of those pieces?
Yeah. So, at Kalamazoo College, our application opens up on August 1. So I really encourage all of our prospective student athletes to get those apps in and ready to go. Like you mentioned, as far as academic info, you can't really have a complete picture of will you be able to get into K and what scholarship you may qualify for until you get through your pretty much junior year. So, we do have some kids that maybe the recruiting process started a little bit earlier, or their heart has been set on K where they have applied early decision. And I love that, I try to push early decision when I see appropriate, because that just makes my life a little bit easier. You can kind of count that as one in the bag. But I really like early action for all my prospective student athletes, mostly because you hear back for early decision and early action around Thanksgiving and early December. So you just get that info earlier. The regular decision deadline is February 15th, and you don't hear back till March. So you're not getting the full picture until a lot later. So I really encourage hey, get that stuff in, get it taken care of. You're going to feel better when all your college apps are in, and it makes it easier on my end. I'm not waiting for people to apply and trying to figure out what my class is going to maybe be in February. So I really encourage early action. Just because you're just getting the info sooner. And I think everyone wants info immediately, and Kalamazoo College doesn't have rolling admissions. You do have to wait. So if you get that in, you can get it around Thanksgiving. And I think that's early enough where you can start, making decisions of what you're going to do.
Yeah, and a lot of high academic Division III schools like that are going to be a little bit more lenient with the acceptance rate for early action, early decision, because ultimately those athletes are making a commitment. Mm-hmm. We have a couple more questions I do want to get to, but we're throwing around some pretty heavy recruiting terms that maybe we can touch base on here in a minute. Early action, early decision. So put a pin in that. But any thoughts on whether 2021 grads, so rising seniors, should consider a gap year to improve times, make up for canceled meets? What are your thoughts there?
Oh man, that's a really good question. And I really think that's got to be personal preference. There's a young man that I was talking to who actually got from NCSA, who was just younger for his grade. And he and his family decided that he wanted to kind of take that gap year to kind of continue to improve and stuff like that. But that's really got to be up to you and kind of what your academic path is going to be like. When it comes to taking a gap year, right now, I don't really fault you for it. There's so much stuff going on that, stuff could change in the drop of a hat. So it's really up to you. Taking the gap year to improve times, if you're looking to gun after a scholarship, maybe. But like I said, my first thing that I look at is the academic piece. So it's really what you want your academic path to be. If you feel like you can improve yourself academically, personally, or athletically during that gap year, and you feel like that's what you need, all for it. But I think it's just a different path. And like I said, I did come across one young man, but his thing was that he was kind of younger for his grade. And I think to an extent for men in particular, that when you get to college, you still are naturally just getting bigger and stronger. So maybe he could, drop a lot more time in the next year, but that's all personal preference. I feel like that's a tough one.
It is, and I think it's good. And I feel like I can speak for you on this front. If that's a kid that you wanted to recruit for 2021, you'd be happy to recruit him for 2022.
Exactly.
It's going to be that much better at his sport, maybe a little bit more academically mature. And as long as he's within range, you just need to communicate that ahead of time. Hey, coach, I think I'm going to take a gap year. Would love to be a part of the 2022 graduating class, but, just hang on to my information for now, and we'll be in touch over the next year. So we got one more question I want to get to here. This one from Amy. What's your biggest sell point for D3 versus other divisions? And I know you got a lot to say about this. Also, what's your favorite thing about Kalamazoo? Thank you, Amy. These are great questions. So
thanks, Amy.
What's the biggest selling point for Division III?
Oh man, I feel like you do get to have that balance in your life. You know, the Division III swim season is 19 weeks long, and that's a long time, right? We do not have like official required practices in the spring. So in the spring, you're able to do more things. You can be in choir, you can be in theater, be in band, go rock, be part of the rock climbing club, because you're not being, I don't want to say bogged down, but kind of bogged down by swimming all year long. You know, our student athletes, even though stuff is not required in the spring, they're in the weight room, they're swimming on their own. And that's great. And that's because they want to get better as individuals. So I think just having like a little bit more flexibility is great. There's still high level competition and training at the Division III level, but just the time commitment is a little bit different. And I think that, you know, for certain people, that is a lot better for them. My favorite thing about Kalamazoo College, there's a lot of things. One thing, you know, that K College does really, really well is our study abroad piece. So study abroad piece is a huge selling point of the college. About 70% of our students go on study abroad. And the reason why that percentage is so high is that the college makes it very accessible for all students. So going on study abroad does not increase your tuition in any way. So they really want people to go abroad. Also, the credits you take while you're on study abroad will follow you back to K. So it's, let's say you go on study abroad for like a full year. It's not like you're going to spend a 5th year at Kalamazoo College. You're still going to be able to graduate in 4 years. Also, on that study abroad piece, we're on trimesters. So our spring term, there's no swim season during that time at all. So it's very common for our student athletes to go on study abroad during that time. So you don't even have a conflict between swim season and study abroad. You can be a 4-year varsity athlete and go abroad. And I think that's a really cool opportunity.
It's great. And again, you're talking about the student experience at this point, not just about swimming. Obviously, being part of a competitive program is part of the student experience, but being a Division III athlete is going to allow you a little bit more balance. Sometimes you'll get dual sport athletes that can go, you know, run cross country in the fall, jump in with the swim program thereafter. But study abroad is a huge attraction, not to mention just the academic benefits at a Division III, you know, slightly smaller classes. A lot of the high academic schools are at Division III, but we know those kids that are showing up to NCAA championships in March are extraordinarily capable and probably could be swimming at a Division I level. So appreciate that. You know, we got to wrap it up here. I feel like we can go forever. This is great. We got one more question coming in, and then I want to just get some definitions from you here briefly. So this one is from Brendan. How do you balance the rugged lifestyle of T3 coaching with this crazy hair care routine? I'd assume that you spend hours on this.
You know,
you went scrub on us today and put it up, man. You should have let the locks flow, man.
That's a great question. You know, that's from Brendan Friend. She is actually one of my recent alums. He had a great season for us. Probably one of the better seasons in Kalamazoo College swimming and diving history. I'll plug him a little bit here. He got a B cut in the 100 breaststroke, going 55.9, the second fastest time in school history, and led our 2 free relay to an NCAA B cut. But, you know, it's tough. I would say, you know, just getting hair tips from the men and women on my team is very key. And just, you know, letting it down some days to breathe and keeping it up when it's time to go to work, you know, when it's business time. So, again, it's a work-life hair balance. It's tough sometimes, but I'm able to do it because I have great folks around me to support me, especially, you know, with that hair care piece.
Hopefully the balance stays towards academic and athletics, but you never know. No, appreciate that. I think that's great. So, and this is the last thing I wanted to get to. I think this is really important. We'll wrap things up here in a bit. I'll kind of let you plug the program again as we wrap it up. But you talked about early action, early decision. And those are terms that we hear a lot with Division III that I don't feel like a lot of student athletes are aware of. And some of the pieces in the recruiting process where early action, early decision is going to apply, and what some of those things you can do for those student athletes in communicating with admissions, financial aid through early action, early decision. So just briefly, you give us a succinct definition for early action, early decision, and what that means for you in recruiting.
Yeah. So early decision is essentially you're applying to a school and it is a binding contract. You're saying, if I get in, I am coming to that school. Where early action is essentially you're just hearing back sooner. I love kids when they want to apply ED because, like I said, you can count it. that means they're coming, deposits paid right when they get in. So I get excited about those kids. And when someone tells me that they're considering ED, I mean, I get really excited because that means they want to be a part of our program. And that's really cool. But at the same time, early decision is not for everyone. You don't necessarily want to go all in on that right away. And I certainly encourage all my prospective student athletes to, consider all the options out there. There's so many great schools. So that's why I really, I lean on early action, because you're just going to hear back sooner. And it's not binding, so you can still, look at other schools and make sure you're looking at all the options in front of you. And again, you get that info from Kalamazoo College in early December or around Thanksgiving. So I think it just helps you put the pieces to the puzzle together a little bit sooner, opposed to waiting to get your regular decision in March, right? And then, May 1's the deadline, and maybe you're waiting from other schools. I feel like that's just kind of like, you can just give yourself a little bit more time. Yeah.
If you're a senior, you want to be stressed out like that. So yeah, early decision at the Division III level is very akin to the early signing period for D1 and D2. It is binding, but it's just options. And Coach Daniels has that option to help you and gain some insight to, your chances of being admitted to a high academic school like Kalamazoo College. So again, I want to thank Jay Daniels, head swim coach for the men's and women's swimming diving program at Kalamazoo College. It's been great catching up. This is fun.
Yeah, it was fun to be on. I'm happy to be here and promote the school and, talk about recruiting. I'm happy to be on anytime.
And hopefully, parents and athletes took something away from this. And we covered a lot of really good stuff. But again, you can follow the program. You see it down there with the Instagram, the Twitter. What is it? KZoo Swim Dive.
Yep.
And then we're going to link the questionnaires as well. So you can go right to the men's questionnaire, women's questionnaire. Get in Jay Daniels' database. He wants to know that you're out here. He wants to know that you're interested. He's at a really high academic school that can get you a great education, but he's also building somewhat of a powerhouse, a championship level team out there trying to get kids to NCAAs at a very, very competitive Division III swim meet. So thanks for being here, Jay. Thanks, everybody, for the questions. Thanks, Brendan, for weighing in on hair care today. I didn't think we were going to cover it. I'm really glad that we were able to.
Yeah.
But always turn into NCSA for webinars and recruiting help. And you can come to ncsasports.org to build a free recruiting profile, get in front of college coaches like Jay so he can find you and start to recruit you directly. So thanks, everybody for being here. We'll see you guys soon.